Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, so we are getting into the War of Realms Part 2. And again, like I'm really digging War of Realms. Like I'm digging the whole Thor War of Realms story, right? Like, and it's, okay, here's the reason why. What makes the War of Realms so awesome is that like everything in Jason Aaron's run led up to it. That's what made it so cool. Because like, we'll actually see a character here named Dario Agron. We'll talk about him. He was a character who popped up in the very early stories of Jason Aaron on Thor. It's cool to kind of see all those little tidbits sort of brought back in. But one of the things I do want to draw your attention to is Jane Foster. Now, the way this picks up is, again, it's basically like all these forces of Malekith, right? Like, because that's one of the things to bear in mind. Malekith has basically organized and brought in all these forces from like all the other realms and used it to invade Earth. Now, the front face that Malekith puts on is, well, I just wanted to save Earth for last. But the reality of it is that Earth is home to some very, very powerful people, some very, very powerful characters, but showing up with like a whole host of basically like armies from Muspelheim, from the realm of Surtur, the land of the Dark Elves, like all these forces that Malekith has brought to bear has basically like landed in New York, and it's a full-scale panic. It's just evacuation. Let's get out of here as soon as we can. And a lot of the people are basically traveling into Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum, right? Because one of the things about when it comes to Doctor Strange's home is that it's, while it is a confined space, it does have like closets and doors and little rooms and things like that that expand on for like eternity, right? So it can house like an endless number of people. But for Jane Foster herself, a lot of you guys will notice Jane Foster is alive. And a lot of you are probably scratching your head in terms of how is that happening, because Jane Foster died. There was literally a story called The Death of the Mighty Thor. The way this worked out was that after Jane Foster had died, that what Thor had done is he had basically taken like the storm inside the Hammer of Mjolnir and tried to use that as a means to basically resurrect Jane Foster. And then of course, once Odin jumped in, then of course Jane Foster was brought back to life. Now, the reason for why Jane Foster was allowed to live again was because of the sacrifice she made to save the Asgardians. And so essentially what it meant is that as a warrior people, like she was willing to sacrifice and actually did sacrifice her life in the name of protecting those who needed her help, but basically died like a warrior's death. And we know that because her soul went to Valhalla, and so she was going to be accepted into Valhalla proper. But once everything popped off and basically like, you know, the forces of Odin and Thor were able to resurrect her, she was brought back to life and cured of her cancer. Now, the reality is that took me by surprise. I thought she was just gonna die and like that would be the end of Jane Foster. I'm glad she's back because it leaves room for her to become Thor again, which is something I'd really be excited about. But from here, it switches over to like the Punisher. And this is one of the coolest things, right? Because you have the main forces, right? Like you've got like the angels from the 10th realm, or from, you know, the realm of heaven, basically, which we'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute. But then you've also got like these soldier guys who are just kind of mopping up everything else. And like as they're going through, like of course, because Dark Elves have a weakness to iron, they can't stop the Punisher. And like one of them is like, why are you guys failing so disastrously? This is like a guy. How could you possibly not be able to kill a guy? And they're like, because he has an unlimited supply of iron. He's just like mowing everybody down with machine guns. Dude, the Punisher is a beast. Not only that, it's actually the Punisher and Wolverine teaming up. We'll actually cover that in a different video, but it's pretty awesome to see them working together. Captain America, of course, jumping in. You've got Iron Man, you got the Avengers. But one of the things I want you guys to notice here is it's really kind of like we're doing the best we can, but we're not doing much. Because when it comes to the Avengers facing off against, you know, earthbound threats, usually what you expect is something along the lines of like, hey, here's like a singular being who's a threat to Earth, not like an army of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of forces who just invade the planet and start attacking everything. Now, one of the other big reasons why New York is being conquered so easily is because the X-Men aren't here. Remember, Age of X, the story that nobody's reading, is currently going on right now. And so because of that whole thing taking place, like the Uncanny XMen, in terms of like a full legitimate roster, is basically gone. You've got Cyclops and Wolverine and a smattering of other characters, and like that's all you have in Uncanny X-Men right now. The mutants are they're doing whatever it is that's going on in Age of X, and that's it. But if we had like a full contingent, like all the Uncanny X-Men, the battle would shift dramatically because mutants are just so powerful. But again, it's kind of a cool little thing to see here. One of the things it also hits on is Dario Agron. Now, the idea is that with Avengers Mountain, there's all kinds of tools and resources they can use, right? Like that's the new Avengers headquarters. We saw that in the first video we did on Avengers, which you'll find down in the description, when they basically kind of changed the origin of the universe and all that kind of stuff. And like they basically exist inside of a giant celestial, more or less. But because of the fact that they're cut off, the reason for this comes from Dario Agron. And that's why I say it's cool to see him kind of make a return. So Dario Agron is basically like the leading guy with Roxxon Oil. And Roxxon Oil is like this hyper corrupt organization, right? That basically has its hands in like everything. If it comes to like any illegal activity you can imagine, Roxxon Oil has a hand in it. But given the resources of Roxxon, what they've done is hack the Avengers HQ and then shut off their ability to like teleport anywhere or really do anything. So they're essentially stuck in New York, or at least they can leave. But like in terms of getting all their resources to their availability, they're kind of stuck here. Now, at this point, things get kind of interesting because what we do is we switch over to Doctor Strange and then like the Coven of Witches of Malekith. Now, Malekith does have war witches, and the war witches are very, very powerful. The problem with the war witches is that technically they should not be able to defeat Doctor Strange, right? Like that's the big kind of thing is at this point, the mantle of Sorcerer Supreme when it comes to Doctor Strange is really more of like a title than an actual role he lives up to. And the reason why is that while he is the most powerful sorcerer, the most powerful practitioner of magic on Earth, you see these stories intermittently where he's like not the most powerful sorcerer in the universe. And by virtue of being the Sorcerer Supreme, he's supposed to be the universe's most powerful practitioner of magic. But over the years, Marvel's kind of shifted that up. Now he's a lot more limited, which makes the stories a little more interesting because you've got to kind of find a way to write a story about a guy who's the Sorcerer Supreme and can do almost anything, but not really, and then make it compelling, which of course we've seen done before. But in this instance, with him being Sorcerer Supreme, that name kind of flies in the face of the idea that like he should be the strongest person there, but he's not, because his Coven of Witches are able to basically kind of shut down his power to a degree, basically block access to different things for Doctor Strange to be able to pull off. And it makes it kind of intriguing because if the war witches are really that strong and the realm of the Dark Elves is outside the main Marvel universe, I'm sorry, in a different dimension in the universe, it should still apply, right? Because like Doctor Strange is the most powerful practitioner of magic in this house. And that closet over there in this house is where these war witches are from. So technically speaking, he should be more powerful than them. But again, it's the nature of Doctor Strange. It gets a little finicky and it gets a little strange. You've also got Enchantress facing off against Ghost Rider. Now, while Robbie Reyes is not technically Johnny Storm or Danny Ketch, still the fact remains that like as the Ghost Rider, he's basically powered by Hellfire, by Mephisto. And so it stands to reason that he should be able to topple Enchantress. And it's kind of interesting that he's not. There's a little bit of inconsistency here, but again, it's not a great big huge deal. And so it's kind of a cool little thing because following all this, while all this is happening, you suddenly have Odin showing up here with a Valkyrie. Now, this is a dangerous game. And the reason why is that while the Valkyrie are exceedingly powerful, the Valkyrie are the women who shepherd the souls of those who die in honorable battle to Valhalla. But with them being here on the battlefront, what this is designed to do is basically say it's a last ditch effort. Every single warrior that can be used by the Asgardians is being thrown into this fight because that's how capable this whole thing is. And that's where it's very easy to lose focus of all this, is that when you're talking about like this whole conflict going on, you're essentially talking about various beings out there who in some degree have power akin to Thor, if not a little more powerful or a little weaker. But by and large, almost all these guys who are fighting on behalf of Malekith are all stronger than your average Avenger. They're stronger than Captain America, they're stronger than like Iron Man or any of those guys. All these guys are exceedingly capable. And so again, because of the fact that the Coven of Witches is ultimately taken down by Jane Foster, what this does is it allows Doctor Strange to essentially like use his magic and then essentially like create a giant gateway of sorts that allows like all these various people who are still here, instead of funneling into his house, grab them all and snatch them all away. The problem with this is that this is a kind of power Doctor Strange doesn't use very often. What it does is it drains him by a huge margin. So he's essentially just like totally exhausted. Doctor Strange has to rest, Odin of course has to rest, and it's basically marshaling all these forces and creating the groups that are going to branch off to face off against these various characters. Now we kind of knew that by way of the solicitations, right? We saw like there's War of Realms 1, then War of Realms 2, and then you start branching off into the little titles, right? So you have like the War Scrolls books and different things like that. You've got like the various forces who go off to achieve various goals. One of these groups is going to serve the purpose of going to Jotunheim and finding Thor. Other groups will serve other purposes, but this is usually how that pattern goes, right? Like we've seen that play out in a wide array of different crossovers over the years of Marvel Comics. In Civil War, you had Captain America's Secret Avengers, you had Iron Man's Mighty Avengers, and then you had the actual like Iron Man Avengers group proper doing its own thing. So again, like in this scenario where you literally have Jane Foster watching everything unfold, what we end up finding out here is that Brunhild she'd basically been killed. And the question that's being asked is if like all the Valkyries are dead, then what happens to those who die in honorable battle? Where do they go? You know, is there because there's nobody there to shepherd them to Valhalla, which means their souls will never truly find peace. It's basically one of these things where it's like, we don't know what to do now. Like all the characters who really stood a chance to defeat Malekith are essentially out of the picture right now. You got a smattering of people here and there, but none of these are like really heavy hitters. And that's kind of what they need to a degree. Things are really bad is basically what this means. Things are really, really bad. Now, the one thing I will say here, and that's what's kind of ironic about it, is that it doesn't really seem to show that, right? Like you don't really feel that. It's just like, it really kind of seems to lack the idea that like things are really, really dire for the superheroes. That tone and kind of emotion really kind of seems to be lost a little bit. But again, it's actually kind of cool to sort of see the story take place, because the one thing that I really don't like when it comes to events is that like oftentimes every single issue will end on the note that like, and this is when everyone dies. You kind of get tired of that. So it is kind of a cool feeling to see it sort of continue on. But again, you know, I'm loving War of Realms. It's pretty awesome. Like it's pretty amazing. I'm really digging it. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.